Project 2, a few pointers to get you started. As you can see, you are working with some data about bike sharing, and it gives you a little synopsis about kind of what's going on at the very beginning. The goal of this project is to provide students with an opportunity to demonstrate your new analytical skills. So you will ask things like what happened, what will happen, why it happened, what should I do, and why should I do it, to tell a story about this bike sharing data. The data comes from a Boston University-based bicycle sharing service, Zip Bike, okay, and you have trip history available to you. Variables within the data include things like duration, membership type, gender, and destination, among others. Okay, you will be graded by successfully performing the tasks that I will describe in 1 and 2. Okay, your work should be neat, logical, and organized, and show all your work. Answer the questions asked in task 2 as well. The first part of this gives you, again, the variables that you will be working with, and again, some sample questions. Now, one important point to point out is that you do not have to answer every one of these questions. These questions that I gave were designed to give you an opportunity to see the type of questions that you could ask of this data. You have a choice. Of all these variables, what you need to end up asking is at least 3 descriptive questions, okay, of your own that would be helpful in the management of this bicycle sharing service. So when you do descriptive questions, that means they should answer what is happening. And then you also need at least 3 predictive questions that you can answer that would be helpful to management of the bicycle sharing service. And they would ask what and why something will happen. So again, that's a total of 6 questions at least, okay, depending on what you choose and the story that you decide to tell. Again, you can design your own, or you can use variations of the ones that I gave you examples of that way. Make sure that your visualizations include histogram, forecast, and you're really looking for a variety of charts available. Scatter plot, trend lines, at least 2 different types of calculated fields, a word cloud, and a map. Now, when you use these charts, remember that certain types of charts will go with certain types of questions. For example, histograms will actually show you the frequency of something happening. Word clouds will also gauge frequency. Okay, so the appropriate chart needs to go with the appropriate type of question. You will do all your charts in Tableau, and then you will answer the following business questions in a Word document. You will provide the results and interpretations of those at least 6, if not more, charts. You will list 5 actionable recommendations that you derive from your analysis. Okay, you want a screenshot of your final dashboard and story. Okay, and again, it doesn't have to be really long, but it does need to have detail in it about your findings and your experience using Tableau. So when I asked you about include a description of your data prep problems and how you handle them, I'd like to see a paragraph or so about that experience. I'd also like to make sure that you include a question, a screenshot of the visual, and description of where, how, and why you use the required visualizations. So again, it can be brief, but it needs to have detail in that brief description that way. So you will submit a Tableau file, and you will submit your Word document with those requirements. Now, once you understand it and kind of think about the instructions and how you want to get started and kind of what your questions or what variation your questions are going to be, you want to then start using Tableau. All right, now, Don't spend too much time trying to come up with the perfect questions, because you may need to change it as you're working on this. Because again, you need questions to get started, but you may find as you work with the data that the more interesting and useful results may be a variation of what you were thinking to start with, or variation of the example that I gave you. So again, don't spend a huge amount of time coming up with perfect questions, because you're going to probably change them maybe even a number of times once you actually start working with the data. Next thing would be to use Tableau. All right, and to do that, hang on one second, make sure that on your screen you're able to see the new screen that I'm sharing with you. So in Tableau, the first thing you have to do is take care of the data. And the first thing you have to do with the file that I gave you is compressed, which means you need to extract the data, meaning do a right click on top of the compressed file, and you will see the word extract. This will uncompress it and open it up into a new folder. Once that is done, you are ready now to connect to the data. Connect. These are actually CVS files that can be opened with Excel, but if you go to More, you're able just to find the files that you uncompressed, and there are two of them, the zip bike data, and then you will add a second file, which is your zip bike stations. You will notice that by default, it creates a relationship. You can look at the individual data by doing like a right or a left different join, but the best way to be able to get the most accurate data is to join the appropriate fields. So to do that, what you want to do is do an inner join, and then you want to drop this box down where it defaulted to status. That is not correct. So you want to change it, and you want to make sure that you connect the appropriate fields. So what that means is they have to be the common fields. And in the data type description that's available in the file, it tells you in there that you want to use the start or ending station. Okay, so we've got a end station here, you can see. Now, how would you know what to pick? It really depends on your question. So if you were going to do a end station, then you would be talking about all the things that were happening when somebody finished the ride, versus if you want the start station, you're talking about everything that was going on when the start the ride. So we're going to do the start station in this case, and then we're going to turn around and we're going to drop it down, and the ID is actually the station ID. And now you can see I have the data available. Now I could still look at a right or a left join, and if I had any of the fields that did not have a relationship, it would show me that. Typically you don't want to use a full outer join, because that will give you duplicates in there as well. So an inner join is usually the best option, because it tells you what files are connected to each other, from the variables are connected from each file to each other, is a better way to say it. So this will give me all the data that has related stations in the other file. It gives me all the information available that way with that relationship. All right, now, once I've done that, I can now start exploring the data. So again, you have some general idea of maybe the story you would like to tell. I tend to like, the life, or say the day in the life of a bicycle could be a story, or what does the day in the life of a bicycle look like would be the question of that story. And so I could start exploring what that looks like. So when you start a ride, because I connected by start date, all right, I could look at different things. So for instance, what if I decided that I wanted to look at birth date. Okay, and so again, you can see it did a sum of birth dates, but that wouldn't be right because I don't want to add up the birth dates, right? So I could drop it down and I could use a different measure. For instance, I could use, say, sum and take that out and put count. All right, so you see I removed the sum and I did count. So it gives me a count of how many birth dates I've got in there, 8,691 to work with. But let's just say in there, I don't really want to do that. What if I want to look at the frequency of birth dates? Now I've got something to work with. So I created a histogram based on the birth dates. I can now look at how many of the dates fall into each category. So you can see in 1944, I have 36 people that ride, and as you would expect, the frequency is 1984 is the highest frequency of riders. And so you can see, again, that age would be your most frequent bicyclers that start their ride at the start stations that way. So again, it gives me frequency, so I can say what is happening here. So what is the most frequent is a question. 1984 in this case. I could say what is the least frequent. 1942. As you can see, older people ride less, as you might have kind of hypothesized already. But you can also see sometimes actually really young people, maybe they aren't able to get out and do the biking either, they are, for whatever reason. And so you can see again, maybe because they're not in college yet. So again, you can see and be able to make assumptions on what's going on looking at the frequency in this histogram. A frequency would be describing what is happening. And so I would have a descriptive chart here to go with a question. And there you could see there's a whole lot of different type of questions that I could ask about this particular data set. And then I could even get more specific, like add things, filters to know how many women, what's the frequency of women riders, right? What's the age or birthday year of women riders. So again, I could get more detailed or stay more general. Again, it really depends on what story you're going to try to tell. Now, what I would do is do a whole bunch of charts, fairly quickly. And then I would go back and start really honing in on which ones I want to use and how I would want to modify them to tell the best story and to really come up with those really good 5 actionable things that management could use to be helpful to this particular bike sharing business that's there. Make sure if you have any questions that you email me. I don't mind helping. It's also very important that you turn in your project on time because it's the end of the 8 weeks and we don't have any extra time at the end. So again, it's very important that you turn your project in time. So get started sooner than later and have some fun doing some visualization and telling a really good story about this particular data set, which is bike sharing.